Okay. All right. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Gilbert Martinez. I am the chapter commissioner for the Rogers Hornsby chapter. We are based here in Austin, Texas. We cover Central and South Texas and have a very active membership. We have met for 230, we've had 230 consecutive months with a meeting. And even through the pandemic, we were able to maintain that streak. So it's numbers are big for Sabre people, and we're very proud of our monthly streak. It just shows you what an active chapter we are. We also have an email list, a Google group that we keep in touch with each other and share baseball information, trivia quizzes, tidbits, research items, things like that. We also do a big winter meeting at Texas State University in San Marcos, which is located halfway between Austin and San Antonio. We just did that last month. In fact, we had our 20th annual Bill Gilbert winter meeting, Bill Gilbert being the founder of not only the Rogers Hornsby chapter, but also the Larry Durker chapter. He passed away a number of years ago, and we named our winter meeting in his honor for creating the chapter and also for creating this community and creating the winter meeting. So I look forward to getting together every month. We usually get together for lunches, but we also, again, we do these virtual meetings from time to time. We also have outings to the Round Rock Express, which is the closest professional baseball team to our area. We also go to the San Antonio Missions, which is so Round Rock Express are the AAA affiliate of the Texas Rangers, and then we also go to the San Antonio Missions, which is the AA affiliate of the San Diego Padres. Lots of rich history here in Central Texas, so that's a lot of fun for us. We also do a big World Series watch party that we've been doing for many years at a member's house, Jim Baker, up in Cedar Park. He has today's trivia quiz for later. So we're very active. We do lots of interesting things. And then also, we try to incorporate new things as well. You probably heard about the Ultimate Softball League that is having more exhibitions this year. I think they got off the ground last year. The Round Rock Express's Dell Diamond is going to be home to the Texas Volts, which is women's softball. And so they're going to have some games this summer. And we plan on attending one of those games during the summer. So lots of fun stuff going on for us here in Central Texas. Before we get rolling here today, we're really excited to welcome Marshall Garvey, a book author who's written about the 1985 World Series between the Royals and the Cardinals. And so before we get to that, you may have heard some heartbreaking news today. I'm going to share my screen here. But this is the report that Terrence Gore passed away in the last day. Sounds like he was undergoing a routine surgery. And I don't know if it was allergic reaction to anesthesia or if something just went wrong. And he has, in fact, passed away. You might remember him from the 2014 and 2015 Royals AL pennant winners and then 2015 World Series champions. Really quite a remarkable player in lots of ways when you sort of consider that he was on the 2015 World Series championship team and he still had not recorded a hit yet in his second season in baseball. But he was a member of the World Series championship team. He also played for the Dodgers, Braves, and Mets later in his career. And so I just wanted to share this. This was news that broke this morning. And so you might have heard this, and especially because our presentation's related to an earlier era of Royals baseball, I thought it was appropriate that we start with that. And Jeff mentions in the chat the ultimate designated runner. I mean, he was a game changer. Well, from what I recall, in watching that scrappy Royals team really have to manufacture runs. And when they needed a base stolen, I mean, this was their guy, and he was able to successfully swipe those bags and help that team win, and then help them on their way to the World Series championship. So I just wanted to share that here at the very beginning as we get started, just kind of taking a moment to remember Terrence Gore. Anyone have any other memories about Terrence Gore, maybe that you would like to share? Anything come to mind? Anybody? Okay. So let us then turn to our program here today. Let me just give you an idea what we're going to do here today. We're going to hear from book author Marshall Garvey. He's going to talk about his book. I'm going to introduce him here in just a moment. So we're going to give him some time. He's going to read a book chapter, share some clips related to the book chapter he's going to read to us today. He'll also entertain questions from us. And then afterward, we're going to have a short report from Dick Butler, who's part of the Hornsby Chapter leadership team. He is the newest member on our leadership team. He participated in a SABR committee, the town hall, excuse me, town ball committee. I keep saying town hall, town ball committee. He's going to share what that was like. And then Jim Baker has put together a quiz for us, kind of related to the coming of spring and spring training. So with that, if there aren't any questions, I'm going to get started here by introducing Marshall Garvey. Very excited to have him on board here, and want to thank everybody that's joined us here today. I recognize most everybody that's in the Zoom room, mostly members in our chapter, but also people from all across the country. Welcome to the Hornsby chapter meeting. So, a writer with over 2 decades of experience, Marshall Garvey uses his passionate voice to captivate readers about baseball, music, history, video games, and much else. His first book, The Hidden History of Sacramento Baseball, captures the overlooked history of the sport in California's capital. After that, he co-authored a novel based on the Korean War, Elle Wood's Odyssey, with his friend J.D. Weaver. His latest book about the 1985 World Series, Interstate 85, the Royals, the Cardinals, and the Show Me World Series, has received widespread praise, including from former Kansas City editor Randy Kovitz, and being ranked as one of the best books of the year by Sports Collectors Digest. His writing has been published by the Sacramento Bee, Cygnus X1, Dodgers Nation, and many others. He lives in the greater Sacramento area in Citrus Heights, California. Please join me in welcoming Marshall Garvey.
Thank you so much for that wonderful intro and a very fun hello to all of you. I'm so honored to be here. Glad to see such a great turnout. I love connecting with baseball enthusiasts across the country in these virtual presentations. So, as Gil said, today I'll be reading a chapter of my 1985 World Series book, Interstate 85. And after this, after I read the chapter, I will play a couple of short clips of events that are described in the chapter. And then I'll take some Q&A. Whatever questions you've got, 85 makes for a great discussion, I can tell you that. So this is Chapter 7, Game 3, Expecting. For context, the Cardinals have just won the first two games of the I-70 World Series in Kansas City, and now the action is shifting east to St. Louis. The sign was sprawled across the control tower of the airport in St. Louis. Welcome to the home of the 1985 World Series champions. The words were printed so boldly that they caught the eye of several Royals players as the team plane made its descent. As they stepped onto the tarmac, the banner commanded everyone's attention and resentment. "If that doesn't motivate you, nothing will," wrote Frank White about the sign in his book One Man's Dream. During his interview for this book, relief pitcher Mike Jones made clear the sign was a galvanizing moment. "You know what? I'm glad we saw it," Jones said with fervor, "and I'm glad some guys took it personal. You ever heard of that let a sleeping giant sleep kind of thing? I mean, we got jump started. I'm not going to tell you that made the difference, but it didn't hurt." Dick Hauser wouldn't bear witness to the airport's haughty advertisement. His trip to St. Louis wasn't by plane, but rather on Interstate 70 itself. Hauser, joined by his daughters Janet and Jill, as well as his old friend Trevor Grubbs, hopped into a conversion van with a blue interior and headed east. While his daughters enjoyed the spacious backseat, Hauser and Grubbs sang along to their favorite country and western songs. The van pulled off at the highway's midpoint, Columbia, for an ice cream stop. During her interview, Jana Hauser remembered how the sudden appearance of her father caught the shop's patrons by surprise. "He didn't have a perception of himself that was different from any average person," she said. "People turned and looked, and they smiled ear to ear, and it was just so fun." The woman behind the counter insisted Hauser didn't need to pay for his ice cream, but the manager refused to let his celebrity status negate the debt for one of his favorite snacks. The drive down I-70 wasn't nearly as pleasant for Don Dankinger and his family. While Dinkinger barreled down the highway in his Cadillac, daughter Denise and other family members stayed close behind. I had to follow him from Kansas City to St. Louis, remembered Denise during her father's interview. And it was raining and the weather was crappy. And I was 18 years old. I'm glad everybody else in my car was asleep because Dad just weaved in and out of the traffic, and he's a great driver. And I was holding on for dear life. One person who chose not to head to St. Louis was Dennis Leonard. Knowing he needed to get a head start on a conditioning regimen to prepare for the 1986 season, Leonard declined an invitation from the team to travel east. I couldn't do anything either way, Leonard said during his interview. I couldn't help them win, and I couldn't be a part of the losing. Instead, he traveled to Sarasota, Florida, the former site of the Royals Baseball Academy. Bat boy Chris Brown would have to wait for a series return to Royals Stadium to witness the action again, as the St. Louis game's occurrence on weekdays was superseded by his studies at Rockhurst High School. Although the 1985 Fall Classic was defined by Missouri's signature highway, I-70 wasn't the only route between St. Louis and Kansas City. A yellow Union Pacific train, dubbed the World Series Special, thundered east with 11 cars packed to the brim with some 200 passengers, among them politicians from both sides of the aisle. Republicans like Governor John Ashcroft and Kansas City Mayor Richard Berkeley, as well as Democrats like former Governor Warren E. Hearns and State Senator Harry Wiggins, cordially shared the ride regardless of their politics or team affiliation. The train was also packed with former baseball players, among them Ted Savage, an outfielder who played for both the Cardinals and Royals. Other esteemed passengers boarded along the way, including Hall of Famer Stan Musial, who joined the Express in Kirkwood before its final arrival at St. Louis Union Station. Fittingly, Cardinal fans occupied the front half of cars, while Royal fans crowded the back half. A dining car in the middle offered Kansas City's signature dish, barbecued ribs. Throughout the trip, the train made as many stops as the day would allow, throngs of fans waiting at each one. First was Independence, the hometown of President Harry S. Truman, followed by Warrensburg, location of Central Missouri State University. Next was the small city of Sedalia, home of the Missouri State Fair. The train's route appropriately hit its halfway mark at the state's capital, Jefferson City. By now, the prior mixture of red and blue in the crowds had given way to an overwhelming mass of Cardinal regalia. Warren Hearns, initially coy about announcing his preference, donned a red cap to the delight of the crowd. My dad would roll over in his grave if I turned my back on the Cardinals, he declared. When the World Series Special pulled into the station at Kirkwood, a portion of the 5,000 fans standing above on the Clay Avenue bridge showered the train with red and white confetti. Throughout all 9 hours of the journey, residents in small towns like Tipton, Syracuse, and California lined up by the tracks to witness the Union Pacific barrel onwards. I didn't expect anything like this, remarked Governor Ashcroft at the enormous turnout at every stop, no matter the town's size. At the final stop in St. Louis was a rally in Union Station, a newly refurbished city landmark. As the train drew closer to its destination, the festivities inside the passenger cars ramped up accordingly. A baggage car with a live country band and straw-covered floor hosted a bevy of two-step dancers, all while Governor Ashcroft sang along to covers of train-themed songs like Wabash Cannonball, while sporting his half-cardinal, half-royal hat. I feel like I've died and gone to heaven, he jubilantly said. No matter who wins, this train is bound for glory. Even after the train completed its journey, the party was just getting started in St. Louis. On Monday night, near a moonlit gateway arch, some 1,500 esteemed guests congregated at the Museum of Westward Expansion for a party paid by Gussie Busch. Everyone from Whitey Herzog to ex-Cardinal players Bill Verdon and Joe Torre to Green Bay Packers football legend Paul Hornung mingled freely with others. Throughout the crowd, attendees wore as many articles of red as possible. Bow ties, silk dressers, blazers, and more shone crimson in solidarity with the club 2 wins away from a championship. Oh, this is the party of the year in St. Louis, gushed Joan McCormack, wife of a Cardinals executive. Of course, it wasn't to be confused with the actual World Series celebration party. That will come later, McCormack assured. While the World Series Special and Gateway Arch hosted famous dignitaries, they were far from the only hubs of celebration as the I-70 series shifted east. During its whistle-stop tour, the train showed the matchup was cherished just as much by small-town citizens as it was by those in Kansas City and St. Louis. The interstate rivalry was passionately honored in areas well beyond I-70, often dividing their entire populations, however small. Bean Lake, a town of 250 just 40 miles north of KC, was commensurately in favor of the Royals. This might not happen again in my lifetime, mused gasoline supplier Boogie Burns during a stop at Earl's service station and grocery store. Devil's Elbow, a town of 250 situated by the Big Piney River, had television reception so poor that its inhabitants couldn't watch the series without a satellite dish. In order to catch Game 2, some 20 residents congregated at the Hideaway Inn to follow the action on the radio. The lack of visuals didn't make their reactions any less raucous. When the Cardinals won, the roof about went off this place, said the inn's owner. You can just imagine about 20 drunks cheering all at the same time. Blue Eye, located right on the Missouri-Arkansas border, was Cardinal territory. Many of its 100 residents showed their allegiance by tying red ribbons to the antennas of their cars or pickup trucks. Dolores Johnson, a cook at Adele's Steakhouse, went against the masses, a royal blue ribbon proudly waving in the wind from her blue 1981 Chevy Citation. That didn't keep the Cardinal patrons of her restaurant from coming by to down coffee and brag about St. Louis's victories. The Royals gotta win, she said in exasperation. For some rural towns, the I-70 showdown was a much-needed escape from hard times. Braggadocio, I'm not making that up, Braggadocio, an unincorporated community in the heart of the southern Missouri boot heel, was mired in economic malaise, one of many farming towns struggling across the nation. It's been tough on the farmers here the past few years, said Zella Darnell, who had run a local restaurant in the town since 1957. This World Series sort of gives them a break from all the worry. They need something to smile about. Despite Braggadocio's distant location, it was unconditionally in favor of the Cardinals. A few of the town's children sporting caps and shirts they brought back from a summer trip to Busch Stadium. Another city featured an enclave of fans who rebelled against the norm. Independence, a satellite city of the Kansas City area, hosted a neighborhood of Cardinals sympathizers who defied the royal consensus in solidarity with their most famous resident, Whitey Herzog. Not that we have anything against the Royals. We just couldn't root against Whitey, explained Harry Porter, a resident of the neighborhood. Independent city officials, however, were so intent on manifesting a Royals victory that they sent the team a container of Lucky Truman soil, believing the same dirt upon which President Harry S. Truman witnessed his upset victory in the 1948 election would bless the Royals with their own upstart triumph. While Missourians of all stripes were ecstatic about the World Series, TV viewers across the country weren't sharing the excitement. Game 1 mustered just a 31% share for ABC. On the same night, NBC drew the exact same share with its Saturday night lineup of programs like The Facts of Life and The Golden Girls. The appeal of the Show Me series was especially lost on the East Coast, with shares of 29% in New York City and as low as 21% in Boston. 85% of people in New York don't know what a Show Me state is, quipped Vic Siegel of the New York Daily News. Within the Show Me state's borders, however, it remained a once-in-a-lifetime event, one whose spoils looked, at the moment, like they would be secured by St. Louis. Yet while much of St. Louis expected a hasty title, the stakes of Game 3 were augmented by a different and much more intimate kind of expectation for Brett Saberhagen. Saberhagen may have been playing a boy's game, but he stood on the cusp of one of adulthood's greatest milestones, parenthood. As he prepared to take the mound, his wife Janine was 5 days overdue in delivering their first child. By now, the subplot of the Saberhagen baby had taken on a life of its own, even inspiring a few betting pools in Kansas City as to when the infant would arrive. All that was certain was the name. Drew for a boy, Brittany for a girl. With such a personal transformation still looming, Saberhagen was expected not only to save the Royals from an insurmountable deficit, but earn the first win of his playoff career. While the Royals recovered to win both of the ALCS games he was injured in, he wasn't the pitcher of record in either. To add to the pressure, Saberhagen would also be wielding a bat for the first time since high school. Granted, his last outing in the batter's box wasn't too long ago. He was just 3 years removed from pitching his high school championship game at Dodger Stadium in 1982, a no-hitter that gave Grover Cleveland High School of Reseda, California, a 13-0 triumph. Within days of the championship game, the Kansas City Royals selected Saberhagen in the 19th round of the June amateur draft. Now, Saberhagen entered the history books as the second youngest pitcher to start a World Series game, trailing just 1 year behind 20-year-old Jim Palmer in 1966, who now surveyed Saberhagen's actions from the ABC broadcast booth. Saberhagen looked and sounded even younger than his 21 years of age. Beneath a pair of eyes as vibrant as the powder blue jersey that covered his slender frame, he sported a scraggly mustache, and he spoke with a boyish voice that oozed innocence. If the Royals had any worries about Saberhagen coming through in his first World Series start, there was likely greater concern on the Cardinal side about Joaquin Andujar. After a magisterial first half that warranted consideration as the NL starting pitcher in the All-Star game, Andujar struggled down the stretch. Following his 20th victory on August 23rd, Andujar lost 5 of his 6 remaining decisions. The slump continued into the NLCS as he surrendered 6 earned runs in a Game 2 loss that put St. Louis down 0-2. He didn't fare much better in Game 6, coughing up 4 runs in 6 innings before Jack Clark's ninth-inning blast rescued the pennant. Despite talking to the media the day before Game 3, the sensitivity to criticism Andujar showed during the NLCS remained evident. During a lively press conference, Andujar was asked if he would talk to reporters after Game 3. "I will talk to you guys tomorrow," he replied, "after I see the papers tomorrow." If there was any reassurance, it was that Andujar had prior success in the Fall Classic, having pitched brilliantly against a potent Milwaukee Brewers offense in the 1982 World Series. Now, Andujar treated his first World Series start since then as a career and life-defining point of pride. Recent trade rumors, including one that involved Andujar and Andy Van Slyke being shipped to Detroit in exchange for Jack Morris, had the Dominican hurler in an especially emotional disposition. "I will quit playing baseball if I don't play in St. Louis," he declared. "If I get traded, I don't care if it's to the moon. I want to die in St. Louis. I want to play 50 more years for Whitey. I wish I could play 100 years in St. Louis." Beyond Andujar's volatile track record, another bit of news put a damper on the festivities for St. Louis. An examination of Vince Coleman's mangled left knee revealed a bone chip, thus ruling out any possibility of him returning to play. More than ever, Tito Landrum would have to sustain his .455 average in the postseason thus far in order to supplant Coleman's absence. If anything, the Cardinals' success without the player that sparked their season seemed to show they were a team of destiny. "We still have the advantage," proclaimed Whitey Herzog. To begin the battle for Missouri baseball, Royal Stadium had its opening moment in the spotlight. Now, at 7:35 p.m. local time, it was Busch Stadium's time to shine. A cylindrical palace of baseball sorcery. Its glowing arched exterior encircled a crowd of 53,634 that filled television screens around the world with a sea of red. Just as he did during the NLCS and in 1982, Cardinals owner August Gussie Busch made a trip around the base paths in a carriage pulled by the world-famous Budweiser Clydesdale horses, in addition to receiving first pitch honors. For all the furor over the interstate rivalry between the cities, the crowd was cordial during the opposing team introductions. The Redbird faithful offered substantial cheers for former Cardinals Dane Orge, Jamie Quirk, and Lonnie Smith. Of the home players, Coleman, introduced alongside the reserves, received the most sustained ovation. After a robust rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner by Lou Rawls, the Cardinals took the field. Ozzie Smith coordinated the action with the move that had become a ritual in St. Louis. Sprint onto the field at a breakneck pace before vaulting into a gravity-defying backflip. "I remember that the adrenaline was flowing," recalled Smith when asked about the moment during his interview. "I went up so high. I was so high. I was hanging around. But then I look down and I go, oh God, they're way below me. So I gotta get back down." Smith chuckled before adding, "I'm just kidding. Just the adrenaline, playing on turf, which was a little springier. You have a bit more bounce." Smith acknowledged the Popular's move importance as part of postseason ritual in St. Louis. "I had done it at the beginning of the playoffs. So here we go again to create the excitement. Of course, it wasn't just me. It was the Clydesdales. It's part of the history of St. Louis. So to be a part of that was always special." As he ran out to a spot in right field, Andy Van Slyke, who rode the bench as a reserve for Cesar Cedeno for the first 2 games, took in the spectacle of his first World Series start with personal anxiety that was intertwined with respect for the game's wider significance. "Obviously, I was nervous. Running out there, you just don't feel the ground," recalled Van Slyke during his interview. "It's the only way I can describe it. It's almost like running on air." Much like Smith, the game's value to St. Louis and the World Series' place in American culture took precedence. "It's human nature to feel elated when you're put in a position as a human being in our culture that this is a really cool thing to be a part of," Van Slyke reflected during his interview. "It's not just about me. It's about everybody." Busch Stadium's 12th ever World Series game was on. Lonnie Smith, playing in St. Louis for the first time since his trade to Kansas City in May, was the ideal person to kick off the action. As Joaquin Andujar fed him a first pitch strike, Al Michaels noted that Smith entered Andujar's name into his testimony the previous month during the Pittsburgh drug trials. Jim Palmer mentioned Andujar's well-known propensity for brushing back hitters with inside pitches. Perhaps a personal grudge, leading to a physical confrontation, would bring furor to the proceedings. If there was any personal tension between the two players, it didn't translate into any on-field sparks. Andujar dismissed Smith on strikes without incident, setting the tone for a scoreless first inning. It was now Brett Saberhagen's turn to make a strong first impression in overcoming his ALCS woes. With the swelling in his hand gone, Saberhagen got to work against Willie McGee, who battled him to a leadoff single and quickly stole second. Tom Herr followed with a walk, putting 2 on with 1 out for Jack Clark. Clark, who had thus far followed his NLCS clinching homer with key RBI singles, had the ideal scenario to do early damage, both runners going on a full count. Saberhagen, however, proved up to the task. A curveball over the plate froze Clark and was swiftly fired to third by Jim Sundberg for an inning-ending double play. Having escaped the threatening opening frame, Saberhagen cruised, his fastball and changeup combo knifing through the second and third innings with ease. Andujar matched Saberhagen through the first three innings. In the top of the fourth, however, his struggles resurfaced. Sundberg led off with a walk, followed by a Steve Alboni flyout. Next up was Buddy Biancalana, who had gone quiet since his key RBI in Game 6 of the ALCS. Before the game, Jim Palmer even posited that Hauser should opt for Onyx Concepcion as the starting shortstop against right-handed pitchers. Biancalana responded with a hit that, while not as roaring as his laser to the outfield in Toronto, still did the job. His first pitch chopper bounced high enough for an infield single. After Saberhagen bunted both runners into scoring position, Lonnie Smith laced a liner to right. Andy Van Slyke broke into an all-out dive to intercept it, but the ball bounced beneath him, allowing Smith a standing two-run double. After much offensive frustration, the Royals finally found their breakthrough moment. Now with a 2-0 lead, Saberhagen cruised through another 1-2-3 inning. Andujar, meanwhile, continued to wither to start the fifth with a leadoff single to George Brett. Up stepped Frank White, the first second baseman to bat cleanup in a World Series since Jackie Robinson in 1952. Throughout most of his career, White was a nonpareil defensive master whose offensive capabilities trended toward contact rather than power. In 1985, however, he hit a career-high 22 home runs. During a phone interview conducted from his office, the current Jackson County executive explained that his home run boom in 1985 was a byproduct of his spot in the batting order. During the regular season, White often batted either right behind or in between Brett and Hal McRae, whom pitchers would frequently pitch around. During McRae's stint on the injured list, White frequently hit fourth in his place. Thus, opposing pitchers threw hittable pitches to White, who parlayed the high number of fastballs into a power display that helped seal the AL West. On the first pitch, White's season-long strategy manifested in the biggest blast of his career. Andujar deposited a fastball over the middle of the plate, which White crushed with such Herculean velocity that Tito Landrum stood still and left as it sailed deep into the darkened tunnel between the stands. In a battle between teams known more for contact than power, the first home run of the I-70 World Series was the kind of discharge one would expect from the likes of Babe Ruth or Reggie Jackson. That was the longest home run I ever hit, and the most special, proclaimed White in his 2012 book One Man's Dream. Kansas City now led 4-0. Andujar was swiftly removed for Bill Soup Campbell, who quelled the Royals for the remainder of the inning. Nevertheless, the damage had been done. After minimal run support for Royals pitching in the first two games, Saberhagen now had the luxury of continuing his mastery with his biggest lead in any of his playoff starts yet. During his interview, White emphasized that having such a large lead early was imperative for Kansas City after two close games. With such a sizable gap, Saberhagen dominated, a brief Cardinal threat in the sixth that scored a run his only hindrance. White and Biancalana added insurance the following inning to make it 6-1. After a division race and ALCS rife with close contests and two hard opening losses in the World Series, the light-hitting Royals had exploded. Game 3 was officially the Brett Saberhagen showcase, and he responded by dispatching all 9 remaining outs in order. In the midst of his dominance, the Aces' endearing off-field storyline even had a moment to shine. While Kansas City batted in the top of the 8th, the camera lingered on Saberhagen in the dugout. Unable to reach Janine by phone at their home in Kansas City before the game, unbeknownst to him, she had left to watch at a friend's house. Saberhagen now delivered his message directly. He broke into a toothy grin, repeatedly mouthing, "Hi, Janine," at the camera. A wider shot of Saberhagen caught him patting his stomach, a coyly questioning look on his face to ask if their firstborn had come yet. The baby didn't arrive, but his signature moment of the Aces' career did. Kansas City, left for dead by a number of scribes after Game 2 and blithely disrespected upon their landing in St. Louis, secured a 6-1 win with a 1-2-3 ninth inning. The 1985 World Series was now competitive, and not an undisputed Cardinals romp. With no comebackers to his hand or leg, Saberhagen had finally pitched at length in the 1985 postseason. The result was sterling. 9 innings, 132 pitches thrown that yielded just 6 hits and a sole-earned run. 8 Cardinals were rung up, and only 1 walk issued. To boot, he was the first Royals pitcher to manage a complete game in the World Series. "My knees were kind of buckling together at the start," Saberhagen confessed to the media, "but after the first inning, I was all right." For the most part, the Cardinals remained dignified in assessing the loss. Tom Hurst suggested it was a blessing in disguise, so as to prevent any overconfidence for both the players and fans. "I don't think we were overconfident as a team," he stated. "I think our fans were expecting it to be too easy." Tito Landrum heartily agreed. "I think it's going to be a scratch-and-claw World Series." Whitey Herzog praised Brett Saberhagen for his season command. One telling indication of a potential crack in their psyche could be discerned from Joaquin Andujar, who blamed his misfortune on home plate umpire Jim McKean. According to Andujar, McKean arbitrarily shrunk the outside corner, forcing him to throw right down the middle of the zone. "I'm not looking for excuse," he said. "The umpiring, it was bad." Andujar lost his spot in the rotation for the remainder of the World Series. But there was a far more telling problem dogging the Cardinals. In spite of their 2-1 series lead, their usually dominant offense was collectively hitting a mere 198 through the first 3 games. "The way we've hit, we could easily be down 0-3, remarked Herzog. Vince Coleman's officially permanent absence was magnified by the team's meager 2 stolen bases thus far. For now, though, St. Louis remained firmly in command of the Show Me series, a stranglehold that seemed slated to grow tighter in Game 4. Just as he did in Game 4 of the NLCS, John Tudor was ready to go on 3 days' rest, a role he thrived in all season. Andujar's demotion to the bullpen ensured Herzog could give Danny Cox an extra day of rest for Game 6 if necessary, and if the series went the full 7, John Tudor would be ready to unfurl his short rest mastery one last time. Much of the Cardinal faithful, even with the promise of a sweep gone, remained assured of a quick triumph anyway. "I'm smiling and my bird's still smiling," said Mike Lubbers with a grin as he pointed to the pipe cleaner Cardinal perched on his hat. "Tell him the Section 256 fan man says not to worry about this series. We'll win in 5." And that is Chapter 7, and now I will play 2 short clips before Q&A. The first is a clip of Frank White's crucial home run in Game 3. Can you all good? Can you see it?
Yes.
All right, here we go.
White is the batter. He hits a high drive to deep left field, and Landrum goes back, but watches this one go out of there. And Landrum turned as if he had to play all the way, and you had to wonder, after Balbone's ball stayed in, you wonder if Landrum could make the catch. But that one was well back and out of here, and it's 4-0 Kansas City. And the bullpen is busy again with Horton and Campbell, and that is the first home run of the 1985 World Series.
By a guy that's not supposed to be a fourth hitter. This ball is smacked.
And now I'll just stop the share there, and I will now play a clip of the World Series Express that was described earlier in the chapter.
Following Game 2, the Royals aren't the only folks riding the rails. The World Series Express is en route to St. Louis as the series scene heads east. Partisans of both ball clubs are on board, and from the looks of things, it's hard to tell whose club is 2 games up. Passing through historic towns like Independence, Sedalia, and Jefferson City, the 11-car train arrives right on time in Old St. Louis. But for some, the highway...
All right, those are the 2 clips, and now I'm open for Q&A.
Marshall, that's terrific. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. My question has to do with a little tidbit you shared about Brett Saberhagen's game in Game 3. Complete game, 1 run on 132 pitches. And there's a lot that's been said about what's changed in baseball. But what are some other big changes that you noticed in studying the 1985 World Series to the way the game is now? Because you certainly don't see many pitchers going the full 9 innings, especially at the biggest stage at the highest level or throwing anywhere near 132 pitches. What are some other big differences that you've noticed about the game?
That is such a great question, and that's congruent with what I've talked about in previous presentations and podcasts. I always like to say the 1985 World Series is a perfect litmus to measure how different the game was back in the 80s as opposed to now. There are definitely quite a few differences. I would say one. Let's see. One big difference that's anachronistic is that this World Series had an alternating designated hitter rule. In the odd years, there was no DH, so Hal McRae had to sit out and couldn't be a full-time designated hitter, and now we have universal DH. There are quite a few differences. I'd say what you said really the biggest is pitching management. This World Series, most of the games in this World Series, actually, let me think about that. Game three, game four, five games. Yes, most of the games in this World Series were complete games.
Mm.
I mean, that's just like incredible. You would not see that today. Today, it would be down analytically bolted down to like he's at pitch 101. It's time to go to this specific guy. Uh, there are definitely a lot of unique differences and quirks in 85 as compared to 40 years later. But I think what you said, the pitching management is the most mind-boggling thing to
Mm.
look at as opposed to how conservative pitching management is today. And I see a question in oh yeah, Al Michaels is great. From Dawn, Marshall, what sparked your interest to write about this particular series? Personal connection. Well, it's a personal connection by now, but when I conceived this in 2020, really wasn't. It was a month into quarantine, and I knew I was going to be busy writing. I had recently finished the Sacramento baseball book. You'd think a lifelong Californian who doesn't root for either the Royals or Cardinals, although I respect them both, what would I have to do? Why would I care about this all Missouri thing? Well, I had a feeling. I had known about the 85 series for 20 years at that point. And I'm telling you, it rattled in my mind in a weird way because people only ever just talked about the call. Always just focus on the Dankinger call over and over. But when I went for a run on April 15th, 2020, I went on a train of thought. And I thought, and my friend Jonathan Daniel was working on his book about the 1982 World Series. So I go to 85 in my train of thought. And I'm just like, 85? Wait a minute. There could be something here. I'm ready to write my next baseball book. I want to do something overlooked. I'd probably rather do a focused one subject thing, a World Series. And people don't talk about 85 anymore. And all they ever talk about is the call. And so, long story short, because trust me, there is quite a story as to my journey with this book. I just told myself I'm going to write the definitive 85 series book. I'm going to show there's more than just the call. And boy, oh boy, did that turn out to be true. I could answer that question for hours on end, honestly, but I got a bunch of others here. Good one, Jeffrey. Doesn't get him. You got Michael's quote there. Talk about some of the players you interviewed. Oh gosh. So I interviewed 27 people total for the book. I interviewed Don Dankinger as well. I interviewed family members. I interviewed others like a bat boy named Chris Brown for the Royals or Avron Fogelman, the co-owner of the Royals. Player interviews, oh man, each one was a life-changing delight. From Hall of Famers like George Brett and Ozzie Smith to more obscure guys like Kurt Kepshire or Joe Beckwith. There are so many stories. My conversation with Andy Van Slyke was really reflective. He was the last out of the 85 series, but he looks back on 85 not with bitterness, but with real compassion. Most emotional was my interview with Royals reliever Joe Beckwith, who passed away just 2 weeks later from colon cancer, and I dedicated the book in his memory. Talking to George Brett, I mean, he was I should say all interviews were done by phone except for Avron Fogelman, which was email, but it felt like they were with me in person. Talked to George Brett while he was walking his dog, and talked to Ozzie Smith while he was running errands. Every interview was just like I said, a joy. I owe so much to all those people. And who was the most? Oh, who was the most fun to interview? Okay, Dick, great question. I'm gonna have to say Andy Van Slyke. Andy is just a gem. He's really intelligent and he's really funny. I asked him, and you'll read this in the book, when Ozzie Smith hit his shocking home run in the NLCS against the Cardinals. I asked Andy Van Slyke his reaction to the home run, and he was just like disbelief. I mean, Ozzie Smith's like the last guy you'd pick to win a game with a homer. I'd have picked a tubby 40-year-old Usher to hit a home run before Ozzie, and I like burst out laughing. So I'll say Andy Van Slyke. Yes, Brian, thank you. Yeah. Dan Quisenberry. Today would have been Dan Quisenberry, Royals closer. Today would have been his 73rd birthday, but he passed away in 1998. Why does he never get talked about today? That's a good question. I think it might be, maybe it's just because he's with maybe like a small market team, Midwest team, and maybe he gets a little overlooked because of that. He should be talked about more. There's a Hall of Fame case for Quiz, but that's a whole other discussion. But great question, Brian. I don't think James Baker. I don't think I've ever seen a professional team self-destruct the way the Cardinals did in Game 7. Did any of the players talk about that? Oh yeah, Royals and Cardinals both talked about that pretty candidly. Royals players told me they knew they were going to win. Lynn Jones told me they knew they were going to win. He could see the look of defeat on the Cardinals' eyes as they came out on the field for Game 7. Andy Van Slyke was very passionate talking about Game 7. He was particularly very upset about Joaquin Andujar's big meltdown. Andy said he thought that was just embarrassing, and he thought that it was a bad look for the team to go out that way, after such a beautiful season. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So yeah, there was a lot of comments just about the Cardinals' conduct. I've heard his son's. Yeah, Scott Van Slyke's a super nice guy, and another son of his, AJ Van Slyke, is the one that got me in touch with Andy. 86 Angels. Yeah, 86 Angels are another. That's another 3 games to 1 collapse. Good observation. Um, just going to make sure I got all the questions in the chat. If anyone else has any questions, chat or spoken.
Yeah, please feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question verbally.
Oh, Dixie, I see you raising your hand.
Yes, it's not a question, but it's an observation. One of my best friends for the last 40, 45 years is a huge, huge Cardinal fan. He has thousands of dollars worth of Stan Musial stuff in his collection. And this series is a subject you bring up at your peril to this day.
I know, I understand. Oh, I know how sensitive it is for Cardinal fans, but the funny thing is, some of my biggest, like Royals fans have been loving it, but some of my biggest supporters of the book have been Cardinals fans.
Mm.
Like I had a Cardinals fan, not only is he just a huge Cardinals fan, but he loathes everything Kansas City. He told me this is one of the best books he's ever read, and he said he'd compare it to David Halberstam. I
Mm.
understand that 85 is like a sensitive thing for the Cardinals, but one of the things you'll appreciate, it doesn't matter whether you're a Royals Cardinals fan or just neutral. This book goes deeper than just recapping what happened on the field. It captures human stories, it captures
Mhm.
like the legacy of the series, it captures the local history for Missouri. It's a compassionate book. I know that 85 has been bitter for a long time with the Dankinger call, but and again, I know this book is not going to cure all the bitterness for your friend or for others. Like I know it'll linger. I know Dankinger is the St. Louis version of Bucky Dent, and maybe he'll always will be. But there's a lot here beyond just the call, and it's a beautiful story for all involved.
Yeah, Marshall, I should mention real quick. We have a couple of members who are big Cardinals fans, and some of them couldn't make today's meeting, and they just kind of like, just kind of made an aside, like, well, maybe it's not so bad. That's not a subject I really want to delve into when they saw the nature of the book, but I'm sure they're gonna find out, that this book coming from a compassionate point of view that tells more than just the story of the result of the 1985 World Series. As you mentioned, it's all these other things as well. So I'll let you get back because there are more questions in the chat. So I'll let you get to those.
Yes, and I also tell your Cardinal members I interviewed 7 people for 785 Cardinals, including Ozzy, and they're all great perspectives. Yeah, Charles, good to hear from you, buddy. Is there anyone you really wish that you had interviewed and didn't? That is a great question. So the 27 interviews, I'm really happy with what I got. I only had 4 people turn me down outright, and respect to those 4, I can live without those interviews. If there's one I could have gotten, I don't know. I have no regrets, no real what ifs. Um, if there's one, oh, I know who. I know who, Charles, to answer your question. This is a random answer. And he's the person I made the most attempts to get. Cardinals pitcher Danny Cox. I really wanted to talk to him, and I made attempt after attempt through all avenues. I never heard back from him. Andy Van Slyke even told me, like, oh, you got to talk to Danny Cox. He's great. I just wasn't able to get through to him. It's totally fine. The 27 interviews I've got was just the perfect combination. It was written in the stars. But Charles, to answer your question, I'll go with Danny Cox. Brian, thank you for that. What did Dankinger tell you? Dick Butler asked, what did Dankinger tell you in the interview? Okay, so Dankinger interview was an absolute joy. Did it on Valentine's Day by phone, 2021. He was joined by his wife, Gail, and daughters, Denise and Dana. Dankinger, I really tried to tailor the interview more to be more about his life and other career aspects than just the call. We talked about the call, but I asked on, like, how did you get into umpiring, or how did you meet your wife, Gail? Like, I tailored more unique questions, and I think he and his family really, really liked that. And Yeah. Oh, it was great. It's still surreal. Dankinger is one of Don Dankinger, George Brett, Ozzie Smith, and Bud Black are kind of the pinch me interviews where I'm like, that happened? Like, I did. So yeah, Dankinger, he told me a good deal about his life, and that was really sweet. Did you try to get any of the announcers? Brian, great question. Early on in the book's development, I flirted with the idea of getting Al Michaels. Later on, after I actually put the book on hiatus in 2022, then turned it around for good in 2023. By that point, I ditched the idea. I just focused on players, family, other people, workers. You get the idea, umpires.
Mm.
So I didn't interview any announcers, but certainly they would have been interesting. And I think Palmer, Al Michaels, Jim Palmer, Tim McCarver, their quotes from the broadcaster throughout the narrative, and
Uh,
they speak for themselves well in that way. So
mhm.
that's a good question, though. And I know you guys got your trivia. Any more questions? Or these have all been great. I really appreciate the
Did you
bevy of.
talk to any of the other umpires?
I did not. That's a great question. There was one, that's actually a great thing to ask because one of the key points of my book, there was actually another blown call in game six that cost the Royals a run by a second base umpire, Billy Williams, but he passed away in 1998. So he would have been the one that I probably would have talked to, but he's long gone. And just keeping the focus on Dakinger was really the thing there. So. Yeah, I've noticed John Shulock, another umpire from that crew, passed away recently. But yeah, it was just Dankinger, and yeah, I think that was good enough for that. Do you know any of any Saber members that attended all seven games? Oh, good question, Rod. Shoot. Well, I've presented for the Bob Roig chapter in St. Louis. I still got to do one for the Monarchs chapter in Kansas City. Maybe one of them did. I don't know anyone from Saber who attended all seven games, but if they do, send them my contact info because I want to talk to them. What World Series do you think deserves a book treatment that hasn't got one yet? Brian, great question. I'm wondering if every World Series has basically gotten a treatment. There was, I would say, maybe the '87 World Series from the Twins' perspective, because Doug Feldman just did a book from the Cardinals side, one more for the White Rat. I think an '87 World Series book from the Twins' perspective through their voices would be a great idea, especially since next year is the 40th anniversary. So, good question, Brian.
Go ahead, Dixie.
Okay, a little bit about writing the book. Give us a few sentences about selling the idea of the book for your publisher and for writing it over the course of several years. How did that all come out to you?
Oh, it again. It was a long process. Pitching the book was again obviously oriented around telling a deeper story than just the call and emphasizing the interviews, and just the new stories that those revealed. Writing the book was a very challenging process. It was unlike anything I'd ever done before. It was a turbulent journey. And like I said, I actually shelved it for a year and nearly gave up on it before I rescued it in early 23. I'll say this about writing it. I got a lot of stuff done in like 2021, but the key to unlocking the book's full potential was when I figured out the later chapters. There, chapter 11 traces a lot of the aftermath for the Royals and Cardinals and Dankinger, but I was overwhelmed by that chapter. I was like, how do I structure this? This is just like a Winchester house. I just keep adding to it. It doesn't go anywhere. Then I found a story about Don Dankinger showing up at an autograph event in St. Louis in 2004, the day after the Cardinals had clinched the pennant. And it was this great story that showed him starting to warm up to the Cardinal faithful that had bullied him for years. And I was like, that's it. Now this book becomes a focus on Cardinals, Royals, and Dankinger, focus on those legacies. So once I got that tidbit, and also when I started finding more local reporting, you heard quotes of that in the chapter I read, that's when everything started to come together. And with Missouri Press's help, I started to cut more fat, realize a strong narrative, and that's how it all came together in the end. That's a great question.
Marshall, speaking of the book, where can members buy your book?
You can buy it anywhere. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Missouri Press, University of Missouri Press themselves, any major bookseller. the key, if I may say, I'm pushing for a paperback edition, and in order to get that, we basically have to move all hardcover copies. So it doesn't matter where you buy it. Don't worry about that, and don't worry about royalties. Just buy your hardcover copy at any preferred bookseller. And if you loved it, leave a good rave on Amazon and Goodreads. Let everyone know. Again, this book has so many great stories. It really was an honor to talk to all these people and pull this story together to preserve it forever. I'm absolutely honored to read it for you guys, and I hope you all read and enjoy it. And I'm really grateful for your time. Thank you so much.
Yay, thank you, Marshall. Really appreciate you joining us today to share this. A great question from Dixie about the background in pitching the book and writing the book, but then also all these other stories. There's so many layers to a World Series, and you sounds like you really explored those in this very particular focused book. And so we're very excited about this. And let me just mention this before you go on your way here. I recognize most people in the Zoom room currently, but I know there's some people that are joining us from other parts of the country, from other chapters. I know Jeff said he's in Milwaukee. I know Dixie's from the Boston chapter. But if Brian and Charles and Stephen and Rod, if you could just drop in the chat which chapter you represent or what part of the country you're from, that'll just be a little tidbit we can capture in our February newsletter that we'll share on our website in a few days. And I just want to let Marshall know we are recording this, so we will have this uploaded to YouTube, and we'll be able to share that and embed it in our February newsletter, which again will be going onto the chapter website in the next couple of days. But we have a few more things we're going to do here today. But Marshall, again, thank you so much. Cap tip to you for a wonderful presentation, sharing tidbits about your book. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, Marshall.
The pleasure is all mine. Greatly appreciate all your time in return. This has been one of my favorite presentations so far. I've got to head on out, but you all have a great time with the trivia and everything else. Everyone, take care. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Marshall. Good luck with the book.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you guys for adding the details into the chat. Greatly appreciate that. I'd like now to turn the stage over to Dick Butler. He's a new member to our Hornsby leadership team, Hornsby Chapter leadership team. He is writing a book that's going to be published later this year about town ball. And so that I think is going to be published in September, if I recall correctly. So SABR has a town ball committee that he was able to attend one of their meetings. I think it was in January. So Dick's going to share with us a little bit of what that was like. Dick, take it away.
All right. Thanks, Gilbert. Yes, last summer when I attended the SABR convention in Arlington, I connected with a young man named Jude Butler, same last name, but no relation of mine. But he made a presentation about teams in Fort Worth over the years, including a couple of town teams. And so after that, I chatted with him for a few minutes, and we both kind of speculated that it would be really nice if SABR would create a town ball committee. And so we chatted about that and followed up with a few emails, but Jude really took the bull by the horns and put together an application for the creation of a town ball committee, which was approved by the SABR board in November. And then he set up the first meeting of the committee in January. About 3 weeks ago, we had a Zoom call, had an initial call to talk about a few things, and I'll just mention one or two things. One was to try to bring some definition to what is town ball. We didn't get down to too many details, but it was concluded that minor league baseball and youth baseball were not within the ambit of town baseball. What we think of town baseball, the core of that would be mostly amateur teams, although could be semi-professional teams representing a town. Residents of a town playing against residents of another town. But the other thing we talked about in that committee meeting was what's our big project for the committee, and the major project, at least initially, will be the creation of a database of all town teams, at least as many as we can compile. We're not sure exactly what that's going to look like yet, but we hope that it will be a resource for all future researchers who may be interested in town ball teams. And in particular, we want to include references to any either future or past major leaguers that played on town ball teams. So that's really the first project. There is going to be another Zoom call meeting tomorrow for the town ball committee. If anybody is interested, please let me know. I'd be happy to send you the link for that. We're going to talk more about the database, but we're also going to talk about possible research projects that members of the committee may undertake. And so that's where we are.
Hey, terrific. Dick, can you just share the link in the chat? Then that way, if anybody's interested, they can just click it directly.
Sure, I'll do that.
Yeah, our newsletter is probably going to be published after that meeting, so I'll mention that meetings are ongoing, but for those that are on today, they might be able to join.
Sure, I'll do that.
Great. Thank you very much, Dick. Any questions for Dick about that? Very interesting. Dick, I'm kind of showing my old newspaper chops because I keep wanting to say town hall. So my apologies. I do mean to say town ball, but I have to think about it to say it.
Well, I have a question.
Please,
but I think
go ahead,
there's
Sai.
already it looks like there's already a question in the chat.
From Rod, yes. Dick, do you see that?
I see that. I don't have an answer for that other than to tell you that there was a woman, I think I wrote down her name, I don't have it handy, but from the National Baseball Congress who was on the phone call. And so she's actively involved in the town ball committee. So I don't know much more about that. That's yet to be explored, I think, in terms of the NBC connection.
Okay, Sai, did you have a question yourself?
Yeah, Dick, in the old days when Major League Baseball teams went barnstorming, did they ever play against town ball teams?
Sure. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I some were minor league teams, some were semi-pro, but I don't know. I mean, in the vast pantheon of all the games, I'm sure there were a few here and there. I didn't come across any in my review of the Texas Hill Country town teams. All I found there was an exhibition game between the New York Giants and the Chicago White Sox that was played in Kerrville in 1930, I believe it was. Other than that, they didn't play the local Kerrville team. They played each other, but I'm sure there are some out there. I can't point to any of them at this point, but I'm sure there are.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
All right, thank you, Dick. Thank you for those questions, Sai. By the way, I'm going to stop the recording now.